My name is Sienna Cross. I was 32 when the life I thought I understood folded in on itself in the space of a single sentence. It happened on a Tuesday, which felt wrong somehow. Betrayals should announce themselves with weather, a storm, a gray sky, something to match the moment. But it was ordinary outside. Sprinklers ticking on someone's lawn. A dog barking 2 houses down. Inside my father's kitchen, the coffee maker hissed its last breath, and my father set down his mug with a click that I would remember for a long time. "You're a burden, Sienna," he said. Not shouted. Said, the way you'd mention rain in the forecast. "This house, this family, we've carried you long enough. I think it's time you found somewhere else to be." I want to tell you I said something sharp back. Something with teeth. But I didn't. I stood there in my mother's kitchen. My father had never once, in 32 years, called it his kitchen until that morning, and I felt my whole chest go quiet, the way a room goes quiet after a door slams somewhere far off in a house. I had moved back 8 months earlier, after my divorce, telling myself it would be temporary. I helped pay the mortgage. I drove my father to his cardiology appointments. I organized the family's finances into a spreadsheet nobody but me ever opened. And 3 weeks before this moment, I had put down a non-refundable deposit, my deposit for my savings, on a family vacation package to the coast. $15,000. A gift, I told myself, for a family that had never quite known how to say thank you out loud. I didn't say any of that in the kitchen. I only nodded, the way you nod when a doctor tells you something you already suspected. "Okay," I said. My father looked almost disappointed that I hadn't fought him. My stepmother, Dana, stood by the sink pretending to dry a glass that was already dry. My half-brother, Tyler, 24 and still sleeping until noon most days, wasn't even home to hear it. He'd hear the sanitized version later, I was sure, the one where I was ungrateful, difficult, a burden. I went upstairs. I packed 2 suitcases with the calm of someone who has already, somewhere quiet inside her, made a decision. I didn't cry until I was in the car. I sat in the driveway for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, the way you watch something small when the large thing is too much to look at directly, and I let myself feel every version of that word. Burden. I turned it over like a stone I'd pulled from a river, looking for what was underneath. Then I opened my banking app and I found the confirmation email for the vacation package, still sitting in my inbox from 3 weeks before. Cancun, 5 nights. Ocean view. All 5 of us. Even Tyler's girlfriend, whom I'd never met but had been generous enough to include. I didn't cancel it that night. That would have been reactive, and reactive wasn't who I wanted to be anymore. I drove to a motel on the edge of town, the kind with a flickering vacancy sign and a bedspread that had seen better decades, and I lay there in the dark, and I thought about what it might mean to stop being quiet. I thought about my mother, who had died when I was 19, and who used to say that dignity wasn't loud. Dignity, she said, was patient. It waited. It knew things other people hadn't figured out yet. I fell asleep still holding my phone, the cancellation page open in a browser tab, waiting. Here is something my father never understood about me. I noticed things. I noticed, for instance, that the vacation deposit had gone through my account, under my name, linked to my email, because I was the one who'd found the deal, negotiated a discount with the resort's booking agent, and paid the deposit while my father figured out his half of a debt he never quite figured out. I noticed that the final balance, due in 6 weeks, was also going to be drawn from my account unless someone changed it. I noticed that nobody had thought to ask what would happen to that trip if I were no longer part of the family currently living under that roof. I think that's the quiet cruelty of being useful to people who don't see you. They forget that usefulness is a kind of power. They mistake your patience for permission. I spent the next 2 days in the motel room, working from my laptop, the way you might work through grief by doing something with your hands. I have always been an analyst by trade. I read spreadsheets the way other people read novels, looking for the story hidden inside the numbers, and there is a particular comfort in structure when your life has none. I didn't cancel the trip yet. I want to be honest about that because this isn't a story about impulse. This is a story about a woman deciding, slowly, what kind of person she wanted to become in the wreckage of being told she didn't matter. On the 3rd day, my Aunt Ruth called. Ruth was my mother's sister, The only person in that family who had ever looked at me like I was something more than convenient. "He called you a burden," she said. Not a question.
He did.
There was a long pause on the line, the kind of pause where you can hear someone deciding how much truth to hand you. "Sienna," she finally said, "your father owes $11,000 on that house. He hasn't told Dana. He's been counting on you to keep floating things quietly, the way you always do." I sat with that for a moment. It didn't feel like new information exactly. Some part of me had always sensed the shape of it, the way you sense a draft in a house before you find the open window. But hearing it named made something in my chest go very still and very clear. "He kicked out the only person keeping the lights on," I said. "He kicked out the only person who ever noticed," Ruth corrected gently. I thanked her and hung up, and I sat with my coffee going cold in a paper cup, and I thought about restraint. About how it is possible to hold enormous information, enormous hurt, and choose not to strike, but to simply stop holding up what was never yours to carry. I opened the vacation confirmation again. I didn't cancel it.
Not yet.
Instead, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to understand my own mind. I wrote about the years of appointments I'd driven him to, the spreadsheet nobody thanked me for, the quiet architecture of care I had built around a family that, when it came down to it, had decided in a single sentence that I was disposable. By the end of the letter, my hands weren't shaking anymore. There's a kind of clarity that only comes after the shaking stops. On the fourth morning, I drove to a coffee shop I used to visit with my mother back when I was a teenager and thought grief was something that happened to other families. I ordered the same drink she used to get. Something too sweet, something she'd have been embarrassed to admit she loved, and I opened my laptop at a corner table where the light came in low and gold across the surface. I didn't feel angry anymore. That surprised me. I had expected fury, something hot and immediate. Instead, I felt something more like arithmetic, a settling of accounts, quiet and precise. I logged into the booking portal. The cancellation page loaded the way these things always do, a little too cheerfully, asking if I was sure, offering a small discount to change my mind and rebook instead. I looked at the 5 names still listed under the reservation. My father's, Dana's, Tyler's girlfriend, whose name I still didn't know, and mine listed first because I was the one who'd built it. I thought about calling my father first. Some small, tired part of me still wanted to give him the chance to say something different, an apology, even a clumsy one. I typed his contact and let my thumb hover over the call button for a long moment. I didn't call, not out of spite, out of something closer to self-respect. I had spent 32 years explaining myself to a man who had decided, in one sentence, that my explanations didn't matter. I didn't owe him a warning. I owed myself, finally, an ending that didn't ask permission. I clicked cancel. The deposit, non-refundable as I already knew, would not come back to me. That part didn't matter. What mattered was the 6-week balance, the $11,000 still owed on the package, the $11,000 that would now never leave my account and land instead as a silence at the front desk of a resort my family would arrive at expecting palm trees and turn down service. I closed the laptop gently, the way you close a book you finished and don't need to reread. Then I did something I hadn't done in 8 months. I called a realtor. I told her I wanted a small apartment, something modest, something that was only, entirely mine. She asked when I wanted to move in. I told her as soon as possible. That evening, I sat by the motel window and watched the sun go down over a parking lot, and I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired, and something quieter than triumph, something closer to relief. My mother used to say that real strength doesn't announce itself. It just stops asking to be believed. I thought about Tyler's girlfriend, a stranger who would never know why her trip disappeared. I felt a small twist of guilt about her, and I let myself feel it honestly, without rushing past it. Not every consequence of doing right by yourself is clean. I had learned by then to hold both truths at once. For 11 days, nobody called. I want to tell you that surprised me, but it didn't, not really. Silence had always been my family's first language. The same silence that let a father say burden without raising his voice. The same silence that let a stepmother dry an already dry glass rather than meet my eyes. I used those 11 days to build something. I found a small apartment on the third floor of a converted brick building downtown, with a window that looked out over a row of maple trees just beginning to turn. I bought a second-hand table. I hung one picture, a photograph of my mother, laughing at something just out of frame, taken the summer before she got sick. I went back to work in earnest. My manager, who had noticed my distraction those past weeks without prying, simply said, "Glad to have you back, Sienna," and I felt something in me unclench that I hadn't realized was clenched. On the 12th day, my phone rang. "Dana." I let it go to voicemail, not out of cruelty, but because I wanted to hear what she'd say without an audience, without the pressure of a live response. Her voice, when I finally played it back that evening with a cup of tea in hand, was tight in a way I recognized, the sound of someone who has just discovered the floor is not where they left it. "Sienna, there's been some kind of mix-up with the resort. They're saying the balance was never paid, that the reservation was canceled. Your father is, well, you know how he gets. Can you call us? Please."
You know how he gets.
Even now, even in crisis, I was being asked to manage his temperament. I didn't call back that night. I let the question sit, the way you let dough rest before you decide what shape to give it. The next call came from my father directly. This voicemail was different, no performance of confusion, just a raw, clipped anger. "Sienna, this isn't funny. We're supposed to leave in 4 days. Call me back."
Not "I'm sorry."
Not I was wrong to say what I said. Just the vacation, the inconvenience, the 4 days.
I sat with that voicemail for a long time.
I thought about the version of me that would have called back immediately, apologizing for a hurt that wasn't mine to apologize for, fixing a problem I hadn't caused so much as simply stopped absorbing. That version of me had lived in that house for 32 years. She had been very good at making herself small enough to keep the peace. I thought about her with something like tenderness. She had done her best, but I didn't have to be her anymore. On the third night, I finally called back, not to fix anything, but because I realized my silence had become its own kind of performance, and I didn't want to hide behind it. I wanted to speak plainly once and mean it. "Dad," I said, when he picked up on the first ring. "I canceled the trip. I paid for it. It was mine to cancel." The silence on his end lasted longer than I expected. "You did what?" he said, finally, and I could hear him trying to decide which emotion to lead with: outrage, disbelief, the wounded confusion of a man who has never once had to consider that the people around him keep their own accounts. "I paid the deposit," I said, keeping my voice level, the way I used to steady my hands before a difficult presentation at work. "I would have paid the balance too, if I were still welcome in this family. You made it very clear 3 weeks ago that I'm not. So I made a decision that matched what you told me. That trip wasn't just for you, Sienna. Dana's parents were counting on it. Tyler's girlfriend." "I know," I said, and I meant it. "I thought about that. I'm sorry for the people who didn't do anything wrong. But you didn't think about me when you said what you said. You didn't think about 8 months of appointments or the mortgage or any of it. You called me a burden in my mother's kitchen and told me to leave. I left. I'm allowed to take what was mine when I go." There was a long pause, and in it, I heard something I hadn't heard from my father in years. The sound of a man realizing, too late, that silence has a cost, that patience is not the same thing as endless supply. "I didn't mean," he started. "I think you did," I said gently, because I didn't need to be cruel, to be honest. "I think you meant it in the moment, and I think you're only sorry now because it's inconvenient. That's all right. I'm not asking you to be a different person tonight. I'm just telling you I'm not going to keep absorbing the difference between who you are and who you wish you'd been." He didn't have an answer for that. I hadn't expected him to. "Your mother would be disappointed in you," he said instead, a low blow, the oldest reflex he had, reaching for the one ghost that could still make my chest tighten. "My mother," I said quietly, "would be disappointed that it took me 32 years to believe her when she told me I was worth more than being useful." I hung up before he could answer. Not out of anger. Out of a kind of peace I hadn't known I was capable of. The peace of a woman who has finally said the true thing out loud and doesn't need to hear it argued with. I sat by my window for a long time afterward, watching the maple leaves shift in the streetlight, and I let myself cry. Not from grief this time, but from something like release. The kind of crying that empties you out gently, instead of hollowing you. Word travels through families the way water travels through soil, quietly, underground, until it surfaces somewhere you didn't expect. Tyler texted me 2 days later. Dad said you screwed up the vacation. That's messed up, Sienna. I looked at that message for a long time before I answered. The old version of me would have called him immediately, explained herself, apologized for existing wrongly in a story someone else had already written about her. Instead, I wrote back plainly, ask him what he said to me first. Then decide what you think is messed up. He didn't respond for 3 days. When he finally did, it was different.
He told me some of it.
Dana filled in the rest. I didn't know about the mortgage thing. I'm sorry, Sienna. I should have checked on you when he said that stuff. I felt something loosen in my chest reading that. Not everyone in that house had gone quiet on purpose. Some of them had simply never been given the whole picture, a family skill, apparently, passed down like a recipe nobody wrote down but everyone somehow knew. Dana called once more, and this time I picked up. Her voice was different, less performance, more exhaustion. I didn't know he called you that, she said. I should have said something in the kitchen. I've learned to let him have his moods and wait for them to pass. I didn't think about what that costs the person the mood is aimed at. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was closer to honesty than anything else that had come out of that house in weeks, and I found I could accept it for what it was. Not absolution, just a small, human admission. I'm not angry at you the way I'm angry at him, I told her. But I needed you to see it. I think you're starting to. The resort trip, I learned later through Ruth, had been quietly canceled without a replacement. Tyler's girlfriend never did find out the real reason, and some part of me still felt the small weight of that, an innocent person losing a vacation because of a wound that had nothing to do with her. I let myself sit with that discomfort rather than explain it away. Growth, I was learning, doesn't always come wrapped in clean justice. Sometimes it just comes with honesty about the mess you leave behind.
My father did not call again that month.
I didn't reach for the phone either. There is a particular kind of quiet that isn't punishment. It's just space, the room a person needs to sit with what they've done before they're ready to actually change. Autumn deepened outside my apartment window, and I found a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing. I framed my mother's photograph properly, finally, instead of leaning it against a stack of books. I started running again in the mornings, something I'd let go of during the marriage and never quite picked back up. I said yes to a friend's invitation for dinner on a Tuesday, the same day of the week my father had once used to end 32 years of my trying to be enough. I thought about him often, but differently than before. Less like a wound, more like a chapter one was slowly finishing. I understood by then that the vacation had never really been about a vacation. It had been about the moment I stopped translating my worth into what I could provide for people who wouldn't look at me directly. Ruth visited one weekend in October, and we sat on my small balcony with tea going cold between us, watching the maples shed their color onto the sidewalk below. You didn't destroy anything that wasn't already broken, she said, not quite a question. No, I agreed. I think I just stopped pretending it was whole. Your mother used to say that people teach you how to treat them, Ruth said. You just finally believed her. I thought about that for a long time after Ruth left. I thought about how long I had waited for my father to become a different kind of man before I allowed myself to be a different kind of daughter. How much of my life I had spent auditioning for a love that was never going to be given freely, no matter how well I performed usefulness. I called my father once more, near the end of October, not to reconcile, not yet, but to close a loop I didn't want left dangling out of spite. I'm not calling to fight, I told him. I wanted you to know I'm not angry anymore. I forgave you for what you said. I haven't forgotten it, and I don't think I owe you my trust just because some time passed. But I'm not carrying the anger around. It was too heavy, and it wasn't mine to keep. He was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what you said. About the mortgage. About all of it. His voice, for the first time in longer than I could remember, sounded genuinely uncertain. I don't know how to fix this, Sienna. You don't have to fix it today, I said. You just have to decide, honestly, whether you want to be a different kind of father from here on. I can't make that decision for you. I already made mine. It's been almost a year now since that morning in my mother's kitchen, since the word burden rearranged the architecture of my life without my permission. My father and I speak occasionally, careful, imperfect conversations, the kind that rebuild trust one small, honest sentence at a time, rather than in the single dramatic gesture people always expect from stories like this. He has never quite apologized the way I once imagined I needed him to. But he has, once or twice, said I was wrong, plainly, without excuse attached, and I have learned to let those small admissions be enough for what they are, instead of waiting for a grander reckoning that may never come. Tyler visits me sometimes on weekends. We talk more now than we did in all the years we lived under the same roof. Dana and I have found something like understanding, if not closeness, two women who both learned, in different ways, what it costs to keep the peace in a house that was never quite peaceful to begin with. I never went to Cancun that year or since. I don't think about the $15,000 with regret. I think about it, when I think about it at all, as the cost of finally hearing myself over the sound of everyone else's expectations. Some nights, I sit by my window with the maple trees bare now against the winter sky, and I think about my mother's voice. Dignity isn't loud, it waits. It knows things other people haven't figured out yet, and I understand, finally, all the way down what she meant. I didn't destroy my family that Tuesday morning, and I didn't save it either. I simply stopped being the quiet foundation everyone stood on without noticing it was there. Some of them fell a little when I stepped back. Some of them, to their credit, found their footing and reached for me again, more honestly than before. That's the part nobody tells you about this kind of quiet justice. It doesn't end in triumph, exactly. It ends in something steadier. A woman, finally, standing on her own ground, deciding for herself what she will and will not carry. My name is Sienna Cross. I was 32 when someone I loved called me a burden, and 33 when I finally believed I wasn't one.